This is The Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Tia Graham. A third of the dams in Metro Detroit are rated high or significant hazards. Many are past their engineered lifespan and many are in poor condition. We just heard about Huron-Clinton Metroparks' plan to remove the Flat Rock Dam and replace it with something called rock arches. The Flat Rock Dam has a high hazard rating and is almost 100 years old. Dam removals and river restoration are complicated and costly. So why are more and more dams being removed nationwide? Is it really worth the time and money? Brian Graber is the Senior Director of River Restoration at American Rivers. He spoke with the Metro's David Lyons. David started by asking why Michigan has so many dams in the first place.
Well, many dams were built to power mills back in the 1800s, early 1900s. They're no longer serving that purpose. We get power from dams now. They go through the grid, and that means dams that are providing hydropower are usually larger dams and not the small mill dams that still dot the landscape. But there are other reasons too. Dams are used for drinking water supply, for irrigation, in some cases for flood management. Navigation, recreation, things like that.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, we're definitely familiar in Southeast Michigan here with the mill dams because Henry Ford, of course, built a bunch of mills all along the Rouge River, which eventually leads into the Detroit River. And people who drive along Heinz Drive will see these dams and the lakes and impoundments that they make. And of course, Heinz Drive floods very frequently because the Rouge River is a river still. And when we get a lot of water that comes in at once, it ends up there. So a lot of the dams that are in disrepair and rated as some kind of a hazard, whether it's significant or otherwise, a lot of those are in Wayne County, in fact. So it definitely hits home, even though we don't think of dams as part of our landscape in the concrete Metro Detroit jungle we live in here, but they're definitely part of our built environment. Can we talk about removals? Because there have been a lot of dams removed in Michigan. All time, it's about 125, according to American Rivers report. 125 is a lot, but 2,500 dams existing is still a pretty large number. What makes a dam a candidate for removal in the first place? Why do we remove dams?
Removing dams has become a really common practice. You mentioned that Michigan has removed 125. There are only 3 other states that have removed more dams than Michigan. That's Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and California. And in the country as a whole, 2,350 dams have been removed. So it's a very common approach, most often to deal with public safety issues. So the state of dam safety in the country is quite poor. Dam safety offices are under-resourced, and dams are aging, as you mentioned. Approximately 70% of dams are more than 50 years old. And the combination of the age of the dams along with increasing storm intensity means that we have a problem. And the number of dams that have failed or emergency incidents around dam failures has really increased. And dam owners that have uneconomical, obsolete, or unsafe dams, when they are acting responsibly, they choose to take their dams out if they're no longer serving a critical purpose for them. And so we at American Rivers, we work with dam owners, together with dam owners, to help them remove their liabilities.
Mm-hmm. And the liability portion it's really worth underlining because even here in Metro Detroit, there's about 95 dams, and 35 of those have a higher significant hazard rating, and half of those are located in Wayne County. So there are all kinds of dams we've mentioned all along the Rouge River, and there's also the Huron River watershed around here. So with all of these hazards that are stacking up as getting past their engineered lifespan, coupled with more extreme weather, why does an old dam with more water end up failing in the first place?
Well, it's both the decay of the infrastructure itself, the concrete, the earth structures that surround that make up the dam. They start to erode, they start to decay, they need long-term maintenance, they often need repairs, but also the dams that were built decades to even centuries ago, they were built with capacities to pass floods that are just different than what we have now for flooding. And so they just weren't designed to handle the size of the floods that we regularly get now. And I think Michigan saw this acutely in 2020 with the Edenville and Sanford dam failures that happened then. And there are more and more incidents like that. In fact, across the country, about 20 years ago, there were an average of 3 incidents like that per year. And now it's more like 70.
And I mean, those are devastating losses for the communities that live in and around those dams and the rivers when they are breached or if they fail. It has taken 7 years, almost 6 years, for Sanford Lake to fill back up. And I did drive past there recently, and it looks like it used to when I used to drive past there. But I've driven past there every single year, and most of the time it has been empty. And, of course, the city of Midland was flooded, and it was really a pretty catastrophic event for them. That brings up the question of ownership and accountability. For someone who doesn't understand the relationship between dam ownership and public ownership, where does that all shake out in Michigan or even nationally? Like, who usually owns dams and who's responsible for maintaining their safety?
So most dams are privately owned. Something like 65% of dams are privately owned. The rest are owned by local, state, federal agencies, or in some cases, public utilities. And in all cases, it's the dam owners that are responsible for the safety of their dams. There are regulators for private owners. Dams are regulated by state dam safety offices. Michigan has a particularly good dam safety office. But regulators require that dams are in compliance with safety standards, but they don't require removal. It's the dam owner's choice. So they're, when they're presented with an expensive repair or an upgrade or even just with the long-term maintenance, the dam owner makes the decision on whether they want to keep their dam and keep operating it.
Well, and that brings up the Edenville Dam failure, doesn't it? Because you said Michigan has a particularly good dam safety office, but part of the failure with Edenville was that the owners had been informed of hazards and issues with the maintenance, and yet it still failed, and questions of who's accountable have risen up. But one thing that's come of that is perhaps better oversight.
Yeah, and the Edenville failure was a somewhat interesting case, although it's a type of case that is happening more often, and that's that Edenville was a hydropower dam that was regulated by a federal agency, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC. And FERC's approach to a dam that's regularly non-compliant to safety standards is to revoke their hydropower license. And when they did that, the regulatory authority gets shifted over to the state, and the dam failed within a year of that shift. And it's, I would say that it's an unfair shift to expect the state to suddenly be able to respond to an unsafe structure like that has been regulated by a federal agency up until that point.
Mm-hmm. And I think recent court rulings have backed that up. The Attorney General Dana Nessel defended the state and said, "Hey, we followed all of the regulatory statutes we should and did everything we should, and it falls on the dam owners for that."
Right, and they were found liable, and I believe they had to pay a significant penalty.
Yeah, it was $120 million. It's the Metro. I'm David Lyons. My guest is Brian Graber, and he's the Senior Director of River Restoration at American Rivers. And we're talking about dam removals, but we're also going to talk about river restorations because that's kind of the flip side. One of the reasons that we remove dams is not only to get rid of hazards, but also to restore rivers and the ecosystems around them. So I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk about the benefits of river restoration.
Yeah, and specifically with dams, there is no faster or more effective way to bring a river back to life than taking a dam out from an ecological perspective.
And what do you mean by that? What happens when a river comes back to life? What does that look like for people who might live or recreate along a river or an impoundment or a lake? How is that going to look different?
Well, number one is that the fish populations that depend on flowing water, so those fish that live in rivers like trout, smallmouth bass, river herring, things like that, their population just really rebound after taking dams out. Fish need to be able to move around. Many of them migrate seasonally, but otherwise they need it for their life cycle. They need to find food sources elsewhere. They need to escape from stressors like heat in the water, and dams prevent them from doing that. So once the dams come out, they're able to move around like they need to, and that really helps their populations. But also, fish that depend on free-flowing habitat aren't able to survive in stagnant water that is created by the dams, and so dam removals also restore habitat. And I think that people get the preconceived notion that when we take a dam out, we're just ripping out the concrete and walking away, and that's really not what happens. There's a lot that goes into planning a project to make sure that we are managing surrounding infrastructure, keeping things safe, and restoring the river in the process.
Yeah, let's talk about if we could pause real quick and stay there. What really goes into it? Like, it's not just taking a wrecking ball to a dam and letting there be some concrete and old bricks lay in the bottom of the river. What goes into that?
Yeah, so some of the biggest things that we look at, along with the specific plan of how to take the dam itself out, we have to manage sediment, which is all the material that has built up behind the dam over the years of the dam being in place. So it's the silt and soil and stones and such that build up behind the dam, and that's usually the trickiest part. We need to make sure that we're not releasing something that could cause damage downstream. So we're really careful in making those plans, especially with the quality of the sediment. Dams that have been there for a long time may have had a contaminant that moved in, even decades ago, that might still be sitting underneath. So we're really careful in testing that and making sure that we're treating it the right way. And then also in the built environment, their infrastructure, they're often surrounded by bridges, culverts, retaining walls, sewer pipes, other utilities. And so we're really careful to protect those things. And then we look at species at risk that need to be protected, and we develop plans to protect those as well. So there is a lot that goes into it. We are usually taking dams out slowly so that the changes happen slowly. We don't have a big rush of water that goes downstream. Yeah, it's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, and can you talk about how water levels tend to change when you remove a dam? Because something that's come up a lot in Flat Rock is a lot of citizens they've even told us on the show that they're concerned that the water levels are going to change significantly where they're at, and that's a big problem for them because they live along the impoundment or along the river, and they're concerned about how that's really going to change just the landscape in front of them. So what can people expect when a dam is removed on a river, like let's say the Huron River? What happens with the water levels?
Probably the easiest way to look at it is if you are fully removing the dam, then check out now what's downstream of the dam, what the river looks like, or upstream of the pond, what the river looks like, and that will be pretty close to what it will look like going through, where the dam's impoundment used to be. The other thing you can do is take a look at some of the other dam removals that have happened around there. I know there have been other dams that have been removed on the Huron River. So go take a look at those sites, and you can see what they look like afterwards. Many times years afterwards, after the more natural changes have happened. And we have found pretty regularly, we work on a lot of dam removals. We have found that people are obviously concerned about a change in the environment with something that probably has been there in all living memory. But we have found that often people really like what results after the dam is taken out. It's just hard to see that until the project has actually happened.
Sure, and like you said, sometimes these projects can take a while, and that's on purpose to make sure that it's done right and it's done safe. And when there is a dam removal, there's often kind of a replacement. It's not always a complete removal. We've heard about partial removals. Can you talk about what some of the options that are often used and tactics that are used now to kind of explain what a partial removal even is?
Yeah, we like to see at least the full vertical extent of a dam being removed, because it removes the infrastructure that can cause safety issues downstream and surrounding the site. But there are other approaches. There are sometimes bypass channels or some structures in the stream, things called like rock arch rapids and things like that. If you want to support fish and other species that live in rivers, you really need to have a more natural river, and that's what we support the most. But there are cases where other things are done, and I think there just needs to be a recognition that when you take an approach like installing structures in a stream, that those structures require maintenance. If a river can cause a dam to fail, it can cause rock structures to fail also.
Brian Graber is the Senior Director of River Restoration at American Rivers. He spoke with the Metro's David Lyons. Michigan has about 2,500 dams. 95 of them are located in Metro Detroit. The Metro is hosted by Robin Vincent and me, Tia Graham. It's produced by Sam Corey and Alex McMillan. Our engineer is Nate Bender, and our senior producer is David Lyons. The Metro is a production of WDET, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University. And this is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. You all have a great day.